All right. I'm going to move some of my stuff around and get you going. All right. So the topic is it's a topic that over the years coaching different clients and different individuals. Um, Here, let me get one more person. It's a topic that some people do really well with, and some people have more of an emotional response, or they let some of their emotions and responses to food impact how they deal with stress, how they deal with day-to-day activities, things that may some people call stress that may not be stressful. It just depends on how we respond. So it's really, the mindset around stress, your emotional state, and then is there triggers that you may have. Some people have them, some people don't, and we use different coping mechanisms. I will talk a little bit deeper into the emotional state because I think uh, with the training Aaron and I have been through with NLP, it's allowed us to navigate quote unquote more stressful situations, but we're in a controlled manner, so we make better decisions. So that's and I will share at the end of this some video links to we watched a Tony Robbins interview with Alex Hormozy this weekend, and it was a good one. So I'll share that over at the end. And it's really talking about emotional state progression, more business stuff, but it's they do touch on how controlling the state is so important. So with that said, we're going to go into more specifics like how stress drives eating behaviors in individuals, or can. Maybe it doesn't. And that's again, from my experience, I've seen it on both sides and coached clients and from both aspects. So how to control your emotional state instead of fighting food or going for food to maybe fill a gap, or you could even go into a dopamine hit, or a way to you're looking for something to control that emotional response. So what we want to talk about is how we can reduce stress-driven eating if that impacts you. Build awareness because that's going to be crucial. And there's things that you can do to come back out of the fight or flight stress response fairly easy. And I'll talk about some strategies there. Improve emotional regulation. So sometimes we create things and make them a lot more detrimental than they have to be. And there's sometimes you need to step back and really truly identify to see if are you in is it a true stressor, or are we creating the stress from a mind standpoint? So again, emotionally, and the interesting part with this is I have a gentleman I work with. He has some emotional eating components that we've been working through and we're doing really well with. He's a binge eater, and we used a lot of NLP structure to help him work through some of those situations, and he's doing really well. So it has to do a lot with your nervous system response and how you cope with certain things. So it's not a discipline problem. Again, it's many times as we may have a program that we are running in our background. What I'm saying there, in simple terms, is we may have been exposed to something, or we've used food in the past as a coping mechanism, just like somebody would use a cigarette or alcohol or tobacco. There's no difference. So, so what we see with that is food becomes a fast relief tool under stress. Stress eating, filling gaps when many times if we really dig a little bit deeper on the situation, we can maneuver it from a a mindset and understanding. Is it going to serve us to fill this gap because we have stress? Really, because we have to do a little bit more work on the mindset and the emotional responses. So how does stress hijack control of individuals? Again, well, if somebody is under chronic stress, yes, we try to address those situations with you guys when you come into our program. What I'm saying there is, if we're under chronic stress, it causes a lot of other health implications, problems, cortisol levels. The system is just not designed to operate that way. So It's going to lower your impulse to temptation. It's going to increase cravings, reduce decision-making capacity. All those are going to be impacted if we're under chronic stress. We try to address that with sleep, movement, obviously nutrition, and general workouts if we have to, if we need to put them in there, and then central nervous system techniques that you can implement. So here's what we've seen with this is stress, craving, eating, guilt, more stress. And this can be a loop, or you can use food as a coping mechanism for just general stress. You have a stressful day at work, stuff didn't go your way, you get home, and then you feel that gap or that stress component with food. So what we need to do is do we struggle with this? Not everybody does. Again, I've worked with clients, and I still work with clients that do have some of these components, and a lot of times it's working through the reasoning why they utilize this as a coping mechanism, and a little bit deeper individual training to identify those patterns and help work through those patterns, so that way they don't continue to do it. And then again, physical hunger. A couple of it's been right at the end of last year. I talked about in a nutritional presentation on hunger, and hunger is not a bad thing. It's a response for our bodies to refuel. So having hunger is not necessarily a bad thing. You want to, in the fat loss journey, you're going to have hunger responses. It's natural. But physical hunger builds slowly, and you can feel that throughout the day. Emotional urges are sudden urges and specific. Again, what we may do is we have a coping mechanism that we go right after food, and or we've used that to fill a gap. And then, like I said, most common triggers of those coping mechanisms are stress responses. So you have stress at work, with fatigue as well. If you're ran down, your ability to make better decisions starts to hinder. Relationship tensions, boredom or loneliness. I've seen that, and I've worked through that a lot with some of my clients in the past. Reward seeking after long days. And there's other ways to reward yourself where it doesn't have to be built around food. You can replace rewarding yourself with food with other things. Maybe you save up to buy a nice thing for yourself, a massage, and things that are going to serve you a little bit better. Many times, willpower is going to fail because when stress and tired or hungry, when all those components are a combination, you a lot of times you don't and your emotional state is, I would say, not normal. So you're outside of the normal patterns of you making a better decision. Your willpower goes to the wayside. Again, this is all about controlling your central nervous system. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that, and I think I have it here later. When you have stressful situations, really you want to identify, is it truly a stress, and or if we look at it from another lens, is it just my response to that situation? Maybe the situation didn't go well, or you have a deadline at work. We have to be able to have the ability to move your central nervous system back into rest relaxation. One of the great tools, and I talked about this on a call a couple weeks ago, is breathing, just breathing in general, but specific diaphragmatic breathing or nasal breathing. If you practice that on a regular basis, you're going to be able to pull yourself back down into a better state and out of the stress response state. So that's just one tool, but you need to become very, very aware of your central nervous system. A lot of times we're not, and it takes practice, just like anything else, just like exercise. The more you become, or the more you practice, the better you are at controlling your state, and being able to manage really stressful states, but pulling yourself back out of that stress response. So your nervous system drives behavior. When stressed, the body seeks relief. And again, that could be learned from the past, or have you used this as a coping mechanism? And then food is a fast relief because it does give you, it may give you energy, it may give you some dopamine, that high and that pushing up. Uh, so what we want to really think about, and I just talked about this, is redirect instead of remove, and reframe and rethink of how we respond to stress and what tools we're going to utilize to maybe fill that gap if we need to. Uh, Regulation calms the body, and that's the diaphragmatic breathing, the consistency, and having better control. Calm body improves decision making. So again, if you pull yourself back out into out of fight or flight, you're going to make a more rational decision. So sounds pretty simple, and it can be, to tell you the truth. And I just talked about this. There's more than just the breathing. The breathing is the simplest and fastest. Other techniques that will work to control your state or help control your state, obviously breathing, diaphragmatic breathing, nasal breathing. They call it box breathing as well. There's a multitude of formats of breathing that's going to get you back in rest, relaxation, sympathetic, parasympathetic nervous system. So walking is a great tool. Again, it gets those endorphins going, stress response drops. Uh, Specifically, if you can do it, not when we have, a foot of snow outside, is if you can get outside and walk in nature. It also helps. And then the next one, funny thing is cold exposure. So I think it's running probably about 10 degrees today here. So all you had to do is go outside for a little bit. But what this is framing is cold exposure uh, in a specific format, whether it's cold plunging, whether it's cold showers. It does take practice. Your central nervous system is going to go right into a fight or flight when you are exposed to the cold. What it trains you to do is regulate your central nervous system back into rest relaxation so you can make a better decision. Grounding, believe it or not, there is a lot of science around grounding. It just gets thrown aside a lot, but grounding is walking barefoot outside. So that's another technique, and it helps pull down your inflammatory response. And I know they sell like grounding mats and things of that nature. Most of them do work. Again, these are just simple things that are tools that you guys can instantly input into your, and you may want to choose one or two and really try to master it. Uh, and then pausing in a situation and evaluating it, thinking through that situation and making sure that you're making a better decision. And this is what it's talking about, like, hey, disassociate yourself from the stress response, control your state. So the 90-second pause. And this may be before you go and make a decision on how you respond to the stress. What I'm saying there is like if you come home and you're thinking, oh, I'm gonna go right to the food and consume food to fill that gap, maybe you take a pause, realize the situation, control your state, and then obviously with the breathing, controlling your state, ask what you actually need and what's actually going to be fulfilling for you. Because again, a lot of these responses and things are programs either learned or we've used them as a mechanism. So I would say food is not a stress tool, but what we've used a lot of times we use these things to quote unquote manage stress. And then what I see so many times is once we do say we overconsume, then we have a guilt mechanism that kicks back in. Again, some of one of the gentlemen I'm working with, we've had to resolve some of those and work through what was the purpose. What's the purpose of utilizing fuel to fill a gap that may be missing, and we had to work through some of that. So again, replacing those coping strategies with a mechanism that's going to serve you better. Maybe it's movement, maybe it's breathing, maybe it's cold water, uh, connection, talking through it, journaling. So, and some people use yoga. So there's other ways to identify it. And first of all, the awareness is number one. And then do you suffer? Or do you go through situations where when you're not in a good controlled state and your stress is high, do you go to food for the stress relief. You got to identify that first and then kind of work through what's the purpose, why, when does this show itself, uh, and really understand what you personally may be dealing with because every person's a little bit different. So structure reduces emotional eating. So when you have a plan structure, eating for a purpose. So planned meals reduce decision fatigue. Protein reduces cravings. These are all just simple concepts that we teach you in our program, but they can be used to help, obviously, in situations, make a better decision when you do have stress come up. So, and when we look at this, most of it happens at night, right? After we've gone through the day where a certain situation may have controlled, or we allowed a certain situation disrupt our state. And if we can get you back into a better state by the evening and understand, hey, that happened, stuff does happen, process it. What was the lesson? What'd you learn from it? And then let it go. Many times when you get to the evening, you're already moved on and already have a game plan to go into. So, and again, obviously planning is going to be crucial in any situation. And then if we cycle some of these things, because again, I was working with the guy I'm coaching with this, then he would feel shameful after some of the episodes, and then increases stress. And then we got to work through that from a mental standpoint, uh, and identify the purpose behind it. So compassion is going to improve regulation, controlling your state, understanding maybe why these things come about. And then you hear me talk about this a lot, and this is going to go across the board with nutrition. It doesn't have to be perfect. We just have to get close enough. Again, in situations like this, success is catching earlier, identifying, hey, am I triggered? Am I having one of those days that I feel like I'm losing control? What's the purpose and what caused that? So there's a lot more digging and self-reflection. And again, never hesitate to use us or ask us, Aaron and I, more specific questions because we can give you more resources around this. So here's, and I used more specific NLP stuff with my guy, which I can always share over with you guys. Notice the triggers, practice the pause, use state regulation as a tool daily. I think the more you use, or the more aware of your central nervous system and stress response you are, the better you're going to be able to regulate stress in general. Because many times, 90% of the stress that we have in a day, we create from our own minds, which is, obviously quite interesting. And there are things that come up that, you know, maybe put us in harm's way, or we do have to use our fight or flight to get us from point A to point B. And that tool and mechanism was designed to keep us alive. Nowadays, we don't get ourselves in harm's way like we used to, running from wild animals and things of that nature. But more people are stressed out than back then because it's more of a mental stress response. So controlling that's going to be very, very important. How stressed am I? And again, what is the stress? Really step back from the situation and identify, is it truly a stress, or can I conceptually talk through it and talk myself out of that stress response? Many times you could, because you can look at it and go, why am I creating such a mess or a big deal out of a certain specific situation? Maybe a coworker said something that you didn't agree with. Who cares? Let it go. Move on. What's the lesson? There's just different ways that you can you can maneuver situations. Another thing is, and this is what we talk about sleep and recovery, is how tired am I? Because if we're um, lacking sleep and had a long day, our ability to navigate and control state it can be a little bit more challenging. So sleep is so important for a multitude of reasons. What do I need instead? From emotional check in is, okay, did I process that? Can I get into a state that's going to be more serving for me? So the big takeaways from if you go through some of these cycles or emotional responses to food, identify the triggers and really be aware of those. That's what I did with the gentleman I work with, and it was like, okay, when does this happen? Why? What's the purpose? Because we went through all that, and in practice regulation, what do you want instead? And if you can maneuver those situations, get in a better state, you're going to make a better decision. So, with that said, this is the end of the presentation. I just wanted to touch on this because I've worked with people over the years that they struggle with this and stress in general, and then they've used different mechanisms to fill the gap of stress instead of being able to utilize their own tools, which we'll talk about there is the central nervous system, to maneuver the stress in a format that's going to be more serving for them. So the thing, some of the reasoning that kind of sparked this the presentation is Aaron and I watched a YouTube video of Alex Hormozy interviewing Tony Robbins, and Tony Robbins is highly trained in NLP, which both of those gentlemen understand the language and language patterns. So what I'll do here, and you got to forgive me on the video, it does have some cuss words or curse words, but if you can bear through that, it's an interesting conceptual understanding of higher level performance, control and state, setting goals. Aaron and I really got a kick out of it because, being an entrepreneur for almost 20 years now, we've followed Tony Robbins for a long time, and then we followed out Alex Hormozy, which he was in the fitness realm for a long time. What I'll do is I'll share those over. And I think there's another interview with Cody Sanchez, which is an entrepreneur as well, but I'll have to go find that. But I'll dump it down here in the chat. With that said, do you guys have any specific questions or thoughts on stress response, emotional response to food? If you do, you can pop on, ask questions, or
So I have one.
yeah,
So like let's say you find yourself in that situation. Obviously, there's going to be things that are going to be more sensible to grab than others. Um, like you know, could you mention a couple of what those things might be?
yeah. So I mean, I'll just give you some examples. Like the gentleman I work with that has we've been working on controlling his binge responses. So what he's done is instead of consuming a ton of calories, because that's what he was doing, and specifically more sweets, because again, you get a huge dopamine hit. Um, we've found, hey, instead of going after something that's going to be full of sugar, let's go after something that has a little bit of protein, a little bit more nutritious base, and maybe it is sweet. I'll give you an example of this is if I have a craving for sweets at night, what I've used in the past, and I'll still use it. I use a Greek yogurt. I will use a flavored protein, whether it's chocolate or vanilla, whatever flavor that you like, and I actually mix that into almost a pudding. So it's going to be high protein, uh, and it's going to satisfy me. But then I would maybe take a little bit of chocolate chips and sprinkle them in there. So that's the that little bit higher in sugar, but the base of it's still good for me. I'm consuming calories, and I feel satisfied because I feel like I've consumed a sweet. So you're 100% correct. There's different ways that we can still maneuver those situations and still come out on top without like overdoing it and overconsumption.
Yeah, good.
But yeah, I mean, I mean, if you can get something that's going to have a little bit more every time with protein or higher fiber, those are always going to help with, pulling the response back because it's not going to spike your insulin as hard. And that's a big thing because then we see a cycle. And then preferably you want to manage the amount of calories it is. So that way you're not way over consuming the calories because that's where we get in trouble. Because, we can consume two or three things that are not very large, and it's already, 2,000 calories. And then that kind of sets us back. So that's where the cycle comes in. So we've done well, for extended period of time, and then we overconsume fairly heavy, and it takes us, another 5 to 7 days to kind of break even again. But yeah, I mean, I can probably make a list. And it depends on the person. We got to identify what they go after too. Is it more of a sweet based, or is it more, you know, uh, a just a higher calorie or overconsumption of food in general? So that's why I said awareness is key, and then we kind of start working through the scenario as a coach, and then figuring out better opportunities because it doesn't have to be all or nothing.
Right, I agree.
Yeah,
Those are good suggestions. And I can think of things just personally that in a situation, grabbing a string cheese, might do it for me, especially if I eat it nice and slow and do the
yeah,
breathing while I'm eating it
yeah,
and that kind of a thing. And
yeah,
so, yeah.
yeah. And with a slow response or slow, that's, I mean, everybody should kind of, I'm bad about that, but slowing down their eating patterns, because it does take you a little bit of time also for the chemical response to pull down your hunger response. So that those mechanisms that tell us that we're full, they take a little bit of time to get the sensor from point A to point B. And sometimes what happens with this is if we eat too fast, we overconsume before we know we're already full. That happens, and that's what they say slow down. When you're eating, it helps with the communication patterns. Let me grab. So I'm gonna grab the link here. Let me go find it, and I'll dump it down in. I'll throw it in you guys's uh, main as well. So what I'm saying is I'll throw it down in the group. And again, if you want, you can take time to. And this is going to be a little bit different perspective, but they go into a lot of higher level communication patterns. Give me a second. I'm gonna go ahead and there we go. But I'll save this over as well. It should kick over. And then, is there any other questions you guys have? Not. So what I'll do is I'll go ahead and stop the recording here, and then if there's other topics you guys want to talk about, again, never hesitate. I'll pull ones through as we go. All right. Well, with that said, appreciate you guys jumping on. Hopefully, it gives you a little bit different thought process, specifically with the controlling states and stressful situations. And then if you do use, food as that mechanism, you know, let us know, and we can help continue to work through those conversations. Because the guy, the gentleman I'm working with now, he's doing really well. He's kind of I think he's about 10 pounds down, and we've got a really good control on his emotional response and his vengeance. So it's always good to see. So with that said, I'm going to go ahead and shut her up, and you guys need anything else, just reach out.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Mhm.